So today we have Lisa Osipenko as our presenter. Lisa is an expert in health technology assessment, and she has experience in academia, consulting, and the public sector. After completing her PhD in systems engineering in the USA, she worked, among others, at the University of Warwick Medical School in England and the London School of Economics. Currently, she is a senior visiting fellow at LSE Health. She founded Consilium Scientific in 2020. Her academic work focuses on examining the status quo of clinical research through quality improvement, transparency, methodological rigor. In particular, she's interested in clinical data integrity, health policy, applied clinical research, and clinical trial design. So Lisa, if you are ready, we can start.
Thank you so much, Kinga. Thanks for the introduction. I hope you hear me well. I might have some background noise of extreme winds as I'm based in South Florida at the moment, and we're expecting a hurricane, so it's really severe at the moment. All right, so my my knowledge of clinical trials started to form when I was working at NICE, and as part of my work, I was reviewing clinical trials brought to us by the industry in big volume, so to speak. During my time heading the team, I think we gave advice on more than 250 development programs that included usually pharmaceuticals, but there were a few devices and diagnostics. And learning, getting in depth into what's wrong with clinical trials, getting frustrated with what industry was planning to do that was not meeting the expectations of the payers. It was a fascinating learning experience, but it was an experience from, it was just a part of the story. So when I left NICE and I was establishing Consilium Scientific, one thing I was very, very passionate about and thought, okay, if I have this nonprofit, one thing I wish I could achieve is to make sure that every person enrolling into clinical trials gets acknowledged. So it's such a big deal, either for the individual themselves, well, that's always for the individual themselves, but also for the family, especially if it's a impaired person or a child or carers, there's a big impact. And I felt this is so strange that these people don't get a card, an appreciation, a communication, and just something to tell them thank you as number one, but B, to tell them what's been learned through all the work that they've put through, all the efforts that they went through. No one expects that the brand new drug ends up on the market, but to even learn with these people that look, thanks to you, we learned that this is no way forward, and we will not be wasting resources in that directions, or we'll be changing our path in this way. Thanks to your time and effort, we managed to find that out. That's fantastic. So I thought that would be such a nice thing to do. Then I heard actually back from some patients who said, what makes you think that everyone wants this kind of appreciation or even feedback? Many people might not want to. And I thought to myself, okay, that could be personal. We can let people opt in, opt out from this information, but it should be available. And it was on these terms, I thought, fantastic. That would be so great to kind of create this community, this organization. That was extremely naive on my part because I knew very, very little about the world of clinical trials and clinical research. And as I told you, I knew very specifically what's wrong with, let's say, comparators of population or crossover types of issues through NICE, but not about the whole ecosystem. So, and then I started to very rapidly learn about it because through Consilium, we were doing projects looking at clinical trial registries. And very quickly, I realized the following, that current situation with clinical trial registration is regulatory, political, ethical, and societal failure. And I feel very, very strongly about this, even though I will give you examples through this talk, why I arrived to this particular conclusion. And the more I thought about that, the more I realized just this situation is absolutely beyond ridiculous. Today, we have amazing technologies, which actually by now are very cheap because we can track every single transaction on Amazon. It's not just transaction. They track your preferences. They track your conversations. In terms of data management, data capture, data control, it's all there, and it's very available. And then we have, I know healthcare has often been compared to the aviation industry, perhaps incorrectly in many places and spaces, but we built a brilliant system in the world. I'm emphasizing in the world. It's not in the US, it's not in Europe, in the world, where we, I think, brilliantly track every single flight, every single passenger, and that includes civil aviation, military aviation, cargo. You can use flight tracker, but at the same time, you know that every airline has your data, your everything from your documents, every passenger. And guess why they collect this data? By law, they're required to share this data with government authorities. They are required to share this data for immigration customs purposes. And they just have no option to not collect it properly, not to store it properly, not to secure it properly. And every day there are 100,000 flights. And that concerns tiny flights within sub-Saharan Africa, or international flights, or even internal flights. It's not like you must track if you fly from New York to Frankfurt, but if you fly from, I don't know, Tasmania to Melbourne, you might just not track it because it's the same country. No, every single record is being kept and tracked. So technologies are in place. And what's very brilliant about this particular example, that regulations, international regulations are in place, and compliance is nearly perfect. I don't have the data. I'm not a specialist in this field. I don't know what is the level of compliance, but it would be very, very surprised if it's anywhere under 99%. And I speak of that as a frequent flyer, frequent user, and you just know how well that thing works. So it's completely doable. And right now I gave you two examples of absolutely massive data management projects, because in clinical trials, we don't have that many patients on trials per year as we have per day on the flights. So it's just different scale here. And I thought to myself, something is really wrong here, and whose fault is it? Like, how did it even evolve? So where my learning was coming from, and I didn't do any research specifically. I mean, it just came naturally as we started to learn. It was completely hands-on. So what we've been doing is we've done at Consilium a couple projects through our Health on Trial initiative for patient organizations, who asked us very specific questions, the answers to which would very naturally come from trial registries. And I thought, oh, amazing, there's all this data that we can use, we can tack into it, and get this amazing analytics, get this amazing meta research to give these answers, to see what's been happening in the past, to help these organizations or these communities or researchers in the field set the trend. Little did I know. So the more we did this work, we did get the answers. This is an example of one of the study we did in terms of looking at what quality of life instruments are being used in multiple myeloma. I think we found very interesting insights. For example, that we found 93 different QL instruments are used just in one cancer. So, and there's some other data, I'm not going to go through that, but it just gives you the interesting analytics that we managed to dig out from clinical trial registries. So, but when we were doing that project, we were absolutely shocked just how poorly the registries are organized, how difficult it is to get data, and how difficult it is to understand whether it's reliable data, and how poor the records are. So I'll give you some specific examples as we go along. But before we do, I wanted to give you just some background on what are the clinical trial registers, just in case you don't have much background in that field. So they play a crucial role in advancing medical research while prioritizing ethical standards, and they're essential tools for promoting transparency, accountability, scientific integrity, data sharing, and evidence-based medicine. That sounds brilliant, and I wish it was like that, but it's a very, very good intention. So these clinical trials registers we're talking about are public. Registration, we'll get to that, but it's almost voluntary. Basically, is that the company or the academic needs to go and register a particular trial, and there are templates of how you provide information about a particular trial. So there is a WHO International Clinical Trials Registry platform, which collects information from 18 public clinical trial registries. You can see there are a lot of countries on this registry. And it has, for example, Iranian registry and Lebanese and Thai and all sorts of registries. And there is a crawler that goes to these registers on the background, grabs the information from the databases, pushes them to the WHO. One would think, what a great idea. And I wish it was a great idea. As far as I know, maybe I would say this information is true as a few years ago, but I don't think it changed too much. There was only one person responsible for doing this work and running this WHO clinical trials register. I'm not talking about, let's say, technical support that this person might have had, but obviously it's a huge responsibility project, and obviously it's extremely under-resourced. So if you go to the ICTRP records and you pull up the one, let's say it's some clinical trial, you'll see how poorly it's set up. And I'm talking about completely just data coding representation. For example, everything is pretty much in one cell, saying this is blinded, masked trial, interventional trial, with parallel assignment. It's all semicolon separated. It's not even separate fields. So it's very badly set up for any data analysis. For example, clinicaltrials.gov is much better set up technically. It provides very good XML data in terms of how it's how it's organized, basically. But EU database is also quite well designed, but the problem, it's very different from how clinicaltrials.gov is organized. And then guess what happens? The same trial is being registered in sometimes in 3-4 places. And then we have tons of trials which are not registered anywhere. And then also, if the organization or academic institution, when they need to update the trial, and you constantly need to update the information in the registry, usually one of the records is updated. Very few times all 4 records are being updated. So you end up with absolute mess, where it's full of duplicates and it's full of incomplete data. And it's very bad for meta research. So what trials get registered? There was quite a bit of pressure, quite a bit of regulation came out to really push for registration of clinical trials of pharmaceutical agents. So I would say it was an improvement. Pretty much every phase 2 pharmaceutical agent clinical trial is getting registered, and definitely above phase 2. And right now I'm talking about developed societies. There might be some phase 2 trials in other countries which are not getting registered. Many phase 1 trials are still not being registered, even in the US or in Europe. The latest that I could find is that only 13% of interventional trials of devices and diagnostics and some procedures have been registered. And you don't need to be an expert in that to realize that these trials must be extremely invasive technologies like pacemakers or surgical implants, something like that, where these are very high risk procedures where they know what's coming up, so that they have to be registered. So, but there are a lot of trials which just never ever get to any public registry. And obviously, you also don't need to know anything about the space to understand that figuring out what percentage of trials is actually getting registered is kind of impossible, because we don't know what percentage of trials is not being registered. And finding these trials in the literature is beyond painful. And this is the work we've actually also done at Consilium with the help of TransparenMed. I will talk about them in a moment, but I'm sure many of you have heard of Till Bruckner and the amazing work he's been doing with TransparenMed. So for the projects we've done for these patient organizations, one of the deliverables we were giving them was to say, by the way, that many trials are missing results and they are truly, truly unreported. And in order to find out non-reported trials, it's not about looking whether the trial results are posted in the registry, because quite a few trial results are never posted in the registry, but there is a publication in a peer-reviewed journal, which is good. But you need to be almost an expert to figure out how to find them, because it's even better what happens. Quite a few of these articles are published without ever mentioning the trial registration number. So your ability to match that trial registration number to the actual paper that you found, I mean, it requires investigational work, and we've been doing this very time consuming and unfair that this work even needs to be done. So in any case, as you can see, pharma trials, for the most part, being registered. It doesn't mean you get good information. It means the record is being created. So, and records are not even being created for many observational studies, even of pharmaceutical products. Majority of device diagnostic procedure studies, quite a few of phase 1 pharmaceutical trials, and digital health is just not even showing up there. Very few trials on that. So now, in terms of, yes, you create the record. So what's up there? Like how much information you get on a particular trial. And as you can imagine, it really varies. But these are the common problems. So as I told you, there is issue with duplicates. So if you download the data from the WHO and the other databases, you have to do that, because if you just use WHO data, it's so poorly formatted, you can get very little value from it. You must download EU NCT data, find these duplicates, merge the records, and then say, okay, I found that trial. Now I'm going to use the data from the NCT database to populate whatever I need to populate to do. So we wrote all these codes to clean up the duplicates, tested them religiously. I think we've done a good job. Then there's missing data. I'll talk about it on the next slide. There's a lot of missing data. Poor formatting, I think I described that for the WHO registry, but there are other registries which are not good at all. Data entry errors. Don't forget who enters the data, a human. Somebody at the university or somebody at the company needs to pull in the data. And I think this is actually fixable with AI, hopefully very soon, but currently it is a problem. Inconsistent records. Obviously, you might have the same trial in different databases, one updated, another one is not updated. And funny enough, quite a few stuff from the registry may completely differ from the publication. And it's not just about results. You might have completely different enrollment data because registers are not being updated. So it is really a mess. Outdated records, once again, because of poor registration practices, lack of standardization, and I'm sure if I was pushed, I'd probably come up with another set of bullet points as long as this one. So, and for example, I also don't want to be like super negative, because as I told you, there are quite a few trials in the American NCT clinical trials.gov database, which are very well organized and very well documented. So you have pretty much every column filled in. I'm also on the board of ISRCT and the UK Clinical Trials Registry, and I really like it because it's in addition to what US database provides, it has patient-friendly summary of the trial. I think that's very important, and it's a requirement. So every trial, they have not that many trials, of course, compared to the US one, but it has very comprehensive and user-friendly data the way it's designed. So there are some good points in terms of clinical trial registries. But this is an example for you of the two data sets that we looked at. One was on motor neuron disease, MND, and another was on hemophilia. We just downloaded all the trials we could find. We cleaned them up to make sure they just correspond to that particular condition. And it tells you that here for MND, we found 1,046 trials, and for hemophilia, we found 780 trials. I don't quote me exactly on over how many years it was, but I think it's over 10 years period, or 50, I think 10 years, 10 years. So if you want this data, I can just email that to you. But so and these are all trials. These are the trials that are ongoing and completed. And here you see just how much are missing records here for some of the, I just pulled out some components because, of course, the data we look at has lines and lines and lines of information, but these are the data you should be able to recognize by looking at the trial or reading a publication. So just check this out. 45 to 40% of trials are missing phase data. It might be an observational study which should not have a phase data, but it should have something in that field to say NA or not, just something to explain why it's blank. It cannot be blank because there's a field saying phase, right? So, but yeah, quite a few of outcome data is missing. Study lead affiliation is missing. That very, very concerning, because if you have any questions, you basically in 30% of cases have no one to contact. So obviously not a surprise, protocol is missing in 90% of the cases. So that's a lot of missing data. And there's another thing to this slide is that these are the results that we've already massaged beyond imaginable. This is not the data we downloaded and calculated percentages of empty cells. What we've been doing at Consilium to try to deal with the missing data and try to fill in the blanks, we created the codes which were filling in the blanks using the information available. So for example, you have a trial that's missing quite a few of these fields, but the trial, and actually there are some fields actually which are never missing. For example, trial title. I guess you cannot click submit button until it's filled, right? So there are a number of fields which have 100% completion rate. So trial title, thankfully, is one of them. So the trial title reads, a randomized controlled trial, double-blinded of this kind of population to test this agent against this and this agent. Guess what? We have tons of information there. So we recoded those titles to push this data to say, yes, it was blinded. Yes, it was triple blinded or quadruple blinded. Yes, it has these comparators. So using the title, we could fill in some of the gaps. So these are the data that you see after all our manipulations of trying to impute for missing data. And that's a lot of work, even with all the codes that we've written. So also, you can imagine if you just download data on a specific disease from the databases and you merge all the databases you have, these numbers look worse. So once again, you might have one specific trial in which you're interested in, and you might have very good record in a clinical trial registry. But if you're interested in any questions dealing with meta-analysis, dealing with anything to do with requiring further insights, you have a lot of disappointment in front of you. So that's just another example of what we've done to try to find information. And here I'm very confident about these outcomes, because in the end, we had to stop relying on all our algorithms and we had to recheck things manually. We could do that because in the end, we had to deal with 214 trials in multiple myeloma in Central and Eastern Europe, and physically was possible to check that. And we had to do a lot of imputations manually in order to provide this. And this is exactly what I say. When I say 10% of results are missing, that means for every single trial, we searched the web relentlessly to try to find the publications, and we did not. And that affected that many patients who were enrolled in these trials, plus minus, of course, issues with enrollment data, and that might be correct or incorrect by 10%, because sometimes registers differ from publications. But what I'm saying, doing this kind of research, which can give decision makers very, very important information to change policy, to change practice. I think for myeloma community to find out that only 0.6% of patients are recruited into myeloma trials from Central and Eastern Europe is a huge alarm. They need to act on that. But getting this information accurately from the current registries is really, really hard. And so this could be wealth of knowledge, but unfortunately, we have access to a lot of noise, and generating knowledge from it is complicated. So I'll briefly go through other issues with clinical trial registries. So some registries have very poor search functionality, others have limited public access and usability, others have inadequate regulatory enforcement in terms of what needs to be entered when. So this is a little bit more information to you about other trials which are not pharmaceuticals, and some reasons why they're not being registered is the most important one is lack of regulation, lack of harmonized standards. I think it's very fair if the company developing a device or diagnostic will say, hold on, but the form for in the registry for us to fill in the information about our trial of a diagnostic or a device is simply not suitable because there are some other parameters that are there. And some missing data will be missing for completely good reason because you don't have this in devices and diagnostic trials. So that's also a problem. It's a fair problem that needs to be acknowledged. And there is, of course, limited post-marketing surveillance in terms of what's happening with devices and diagnostics compared to pharmaceuticals. So not to be super negative, there were some attempts to enforce registration of both pharmaceutical and non-pharmaceutical clinical trials. I think with the EU push for medical device regulation, this should increase. And now there is a new database for the EU, so hopefully they will be a bit better. But obviously, we already have very good historical evidence saying that compliance is just not there, even though I think journals did a good job making sure compliance increases. They'll just say, we are not going to publish your paper in BMJ if you don't have this record in the registers. That's good. There's a way to enforce it. But the question is, are we worried about the publication that should come out in BMJ? Or should we be concerned about the totality of evidence and total body of knowledge? Because to me, the data on negative trials and patients who potentially suffered in that clinical trial is super important. He might never even make it. The objective might be very far from the BMJ for that particular trial, and we'll never find out. So of course, you can imagine that people are aware of the situation and people are working on this to figure out whether there are some solutions. And of course, there is a proposal of regulatory enforcement, standardization, implementation of technological improvements, and greater commitment from relevant sponsors, researchers, and government. I don't know what exactly I feel about this, but let me give you just some examples. So in case you don't know about TransparenMed, check out the website. Till has been doing a brilliant job for 7 years, disciplining the field almost as a sole agent and as a volunteer. It's been impressive the work he has done to ensure clinical trial reporting. Before his work started, it all evolved from the All Trials campaign, which was started in 2015 by Ben Goldacre and his team at the Oxford University. And then TransparenMed was set up by Till specifically to deal with the issue. So back then, I think it was 2018, about 40%, 40 to 50% of pharmaceutical clinical trials were registered. And this is where we are now. And I almost want to say this is Till's success, because if you ever followed him on the Twitter website, or on his website, he relentlessly would be publishing, saying, University of Vienna, you started this particular trial, where are the results? So he would literally be going after each individual trial or each individual organization. So, and these are results of the clinicaltrials.gov, slightly lower, but still compared to 40 to 50%, 77%, to me, it looks very impressive. And but still, you can say it's not 100%. Where the hell is the rest? And these are the top two databases here. So I'm trying to be happy about the fact that things could have been worse, but things are so far from being the way they should be. Just imagine for a second if tomorrow 30% of the flights were not recorded. Just think about that. Just think of the chaos of how many terrorists or other people could have used that to their advantage or cross the borders or do whatever. So that's just unthinkable. So then there's this super interesting number, 62 billion. So this is how much US government should have collected in fines should it be less conniving and actually passing the laws that make some sense. Unfortunately, it's not the case. They passed the law that is completely optional because when I saw this, I was like, oh my God, we have to go after them. We have to have I don't know anything about the legal system, but we have to sue them. There's a way to get out. And then it occurred to me almost the same evening. I was like, hold on. Pharma knows about that. And if there was any risk, they would have acted. So there might be something about that law that completely kind of covers everyone for no one for this to be a risk. And of course, this turned out to be the case. So last year, the citizens petition was filed to the FDA about this law from 2007, where they require pharma companies, medical device manufacturers, universities, and hospitals to publish summary results on clinicaltrials.gov and enforce it. Enforce meaning if you don't publish, you pay 10K for every day of delay. And that's why that number keeps clocking like that, and it's updated every few months. So the petition demanded to issue more warnings, focus its enforcement actions, collect the money. Imagine 62 billion. Oh my gosh, you can give that money for a lot of things to improve the clinical trial situation in the world. Make public a list of the warnings it has issued. Needless to say, that led nowhere, and you can read on Till's website the full article of what happened. But basically, nothing happened. They just dismissed it. There are a few nuances here. Once again, I invite you to go here and I'll share the slides if you want to read the outcome of the petition. But basically, they said, listen, we're too busy. We're just not going to deal with that. And we're just fine the way we are. And that's very, very typical FDA. And they said they have other things to focus on. So whether we can fix it. At Concilium, we run similar events at the same time on Alternative Thursdays to yours. And we had quite a few talks on what do we do? What do we do in all this situation? As you see the titles, should sponsors be sanctioned for failing to report clinical results? What are the new ways to drive clinical trial reporting? How can we fix the global clinical trial registry system? And then there was the other events. How can your country and the medical research waste, improving clinical trial reporting in Nordic countries? How can UK clinical trial transparency be implemented in other countries? So I don't want to say that there are people not thinking about this. A lot of people are thinking about this. And I also don't want to be negative and disregard absolute enormous efforts put by people to get to where we are, because compared to even 20 years ago, we have a lot more information on clinical trial registration. We're much better off than where we were. And it's endless hours of many volunteers. It's a lot of commitment from some people and some organizations. And I also thought about that, and I felt it is quite unfortunate that such, I wouldn't say they're disorganized. They're very dispersed efforts to get us to this condition. Because if we just had regulations without requiring 100% compliance, like we have for aviation across the globe, because guess what? In sub-Saharan Africa and in very, very poor countries, every single flight taking off, maybe besides those used for agriculture with a single motor plane to put something on top of crops, but every single flight with patients on board, people on board or cargo gets logged with all the information. So it's not about some countries not having resources or some countries not having education or some patients, blah, blah, blah. It's definitely possible. So, yeah, I commend all the amazing efforts that's been done by people. Also, some people may argue, especially people who actually open the entry forms and enter that data, which is probably quite painful. And hopefully AI can help with that, because every single trial has a protocol, every single trial. So there must be a way of figuring out how data from that protocol can be accurately transported using whatever tools we already have into the registries and making sure everything is kept up to date. So I feel, so I'm not calling, yes, I am calling for more bureaucracy, significant bureaucracy here, because here this will serve tremendous good for public health, for research, for discipline. And unfortunately, we have very, very misplaced bureaucracy. We have tons of bureaucracy in healthcare, which is stifling the innovation, which is really hurting a lot to do with healthcare. But where we definitely need it beyond and above, we don't have it because no one is responsible and because no one has the time. So, and who should be responsible? In my view, I mean, I don't know, but I think it should be WHO because I looked up, I think the aviation was disciplined in the end by the organization reporting to the United Nations. So whatever, it has to be above government authority, making it non-negotiable for everyone, including a single patient, into any trial. I don't care whether it's digital technologies, observational trial, or whatever, to be logged. And yeah, this is not happening. So I'd like to conclude on the point that at least we have what we have, so it's better than nothing. I caution you to be very, very careful not to rely on the database, on the records in these registries. Be very aware of how this needs to be handled and how much cleaning this requires, how many underwater, the quality of the data. So be careful. Um, I don't know whether this literally can be resolved to achieve what we have achieved in aviation industry. I'd love to. That would be my dream future. And what makes it very frustrating is sometimes we dream about certain things, but they are so unachievable that they remain in the dreams compartment, because it must be very frustrating to be a climate scientist when you go and you complain and this and this and this, but real results are extremely, extremely difficult to achieve. You can just have marginal steps here and there. Here, the fix is so simple. And that is completely infuriating that this is not in place. So I don't know who needs to be lobbied or who needs to be convinced. Maybe some rich person who enrolls their relative into clinical trial one day realizes that, oh my God, that's how things are screwed up. Maybe that's what we need to do. So that's my only hope. I wish to see that future at some point. So I don't want to say it's impossible, but so far I don't think it's very, very achievable. So that's my story for you.